Hello, my name is David Cavill. I have bred pedigree dogs for over 30 years, and I judge many breeds both in Britain and all over the world. I have also worked extensively with rescue dogs when I was a senior manager at Battersea Dogs Home. In my lectures on breeding and judging dogs, there is a major section at the beginning about how dogs came to be as they are, and it might help those who have assumed that everything in the recent television programme Pedigree Dogs Exposed was gospel, that there is another side to the claims which it made, another side which shows that many of the statements were seriously distorted and designed just to grab headlines. Headlines, of course, create a bandwagon, and many individuals and organisations have jumped on board. In this, the producers were extraordinarily successful. Firstly, a few facts. A groomer friend of mine sees dozens of Cavalier King Charles Spaniels every month and has never, ever seen a dog with the symptoms described in Pedigree Dogs Exposed. This is not surprising, as the incidence is estimated to be about 2%. The programme stated that the incidence was up to 30%. That is not itself untrue, but certainly implied that the incidence was approximately 15 times the correct figure. Several people have called for the boxers shown in the programme to be put to sleep, and even for the owners to be prosecuted for cruelty in that they are keeping a deformed dog alive. The truth is that the dog is under successful medication and fits about once a month. Then the statement by the RSPCA vet has been criticised by senior members of his own profession. It is inaccurate and untrue, and the RSPCA has had since to withdraw support for it. The incidence of dogs with an inbreeding coefficient of 50%, that is mother to son or vice versa, or father to daughter or vice versa, is less than 1%. The average inbreeding coefficient of pedigree dogs on the Kennel Club registry is less than 5%. To put this in perspective, if someone marries their cousin, a very common occurrence in many human societies, the inbreeding coefficient is just 6.25%. There are many other examples of the way in which statements have been taken out of context to prove the allegations made in the programme. Beverly Cuddy is a past master of the technique. She is a friend of mine, incidentally, but with a long history of prejudice against pedigree dogs for personal, professional and political reasons, despite the fact that she is herself a championship show judge of bearded collies. She says in the programme pedigree dogs are falling apart. This is demonstrably not true, as anyone who goes to a dog show can see for themselves. Now, this is not to say that there are no serious problems within the world of pedigree dog breeding. There are. But the truth is very different to the message which Pedigree Dogs Exposed tried to deliver. Firstly, let us see if we can understand the way in which the normal translates as the exaggerated and finally to the deformed in the breeding of animals. In my lectures, I begin with a picture of a mongrel which I describe as an unexaggerated dog. It's about 14 inches high at the shoulder, a little longer than it is high, neither heavy nor thin, and with a medium-length single coat similar to that which might find on a working setter. When I was one of the senior managers at Battersea, this was typical of hundreds of dogs we were asked to rehome. Whether it is typical of the dogs that hung around human encampments in the days when most of us were nomadic travellers, I do not know. I suspect that semi-wild dogs then were leaner and racier, but what I am sure of is that if you left 1,000 of our 21st century pedigree dogs and bitches together in an enormously enclosed game park and let them loose, a large proportion of dogs similar to the ones I have described would be the result after 4 or 5 generations of breeding. Now, why should this be? Well, firstly, some of the breeds would not survive into the 2nd generation. Some would not be able to hunt and feed themselves, while others would not be able to mate or whelp naturally, so there would be no puppies from these breeds. Of the rest, some would be more adept at foraging for food than others, and if the space were varied enough, it would not be long before the dogs most adapted to specific environments would migrate to those areas where they would have the best chance of survival. So you would have some variety in size, weight and conformation, and temperament too, of course, but a sizable number would be like my Battersea mongrel, perfectly adapted for the widest type of terrain. Of the more specialist types, you would see some leaner, with longer legs and deeper chests. Others, probably fewer, would be thicker set and be heavy enough to bring down slower but bigger animals. Our little mongrel would do well from the scraps left by those other groups, as well as being fast enough to catch small and often elderly or ill game. Now bring in a human dimension. To begin with, man refines and improves what he has, but essentially dogs that can be helpful survive, and those which cannot are rejected, and either killed or become household pets and children's playthings. Remember, the same process was also going on with other domestic animals. Cows were being bred that would give more milk for longer, sheep for thicker coats, pigs for more piglets in a litter, which would grow to maturity with more lean meat and less fat. The process was not confined to dogs. As far as dogs are concerned, a few types were developed for more specialised uses over the millennia. Dogs for herding, dogs for war, and dogs for hunting, for fun rather than food. But eventually people began to use the extraordinarily flexible chromosomes of the canine genome to produce animals radically different from the norm for fun, in just the same way as breeders of cats, horses, budgerigars, pigeons, and even roses have done. Dogs became longer, shorter, taller, thicker set, shorter muzzled, and lower to ground in terms of conformation, and hairier, smoother or slacker skinned, wrinkled, double-coated, fancy-tailed, fancy-eared, and multicoloured in terms of their individual characteristics. I emphasise that I have no problem with any of this, but there is a point when the changes introduced militate against the best interests of the dog in terms of its health and welfare. My talk asks the deceptively simple question: where is that point? I hope I have shown that it is not unreasonable to breed specialist dogs for our own pleasure and for the pet-owning public, so long as they are well cared for and remain fit and healthy. A breeder may feel aesthetically that they would prefer their dog's ears to be a little more upright, longer or better set. They might want the eyes darker or the coat longer. They might want more or less of a stop, or a broader or narrower width of skull. All of these characteristics are ones which are peripheral and acceptable. Coats can be washed and groomed easily, but under normal circumstances, skulls cannot be enlarged, bones cannot be lengthened or shortened, livers and lungs, hearts and throats, and eyes and noses cannot be replaced, so these are the physical characteristics where the question I have posed becomes important. I offer you this definition, which I think is reasonable both for ordinary pet owners and for the kennel club and dog breeders. As soon as an animal finds it difficult to eat or chew normal food, has difficulty in breathing under all normal circumstances, finds it difficult to keep up with its owner at a brisk walk, cannot under normal circumstances mate or whelp naturally, or they die well before the average age one expects a dog to die, then it is important that we take a long, hard look at what breeders are doing. Now this has already happened in many breeds, and the Kennel Club, despite what the programme implied, has put a great deal of pressure on many others to take action. The Chow Chow is an excellent example. From being a dog with real problems with its conformation, eyes and muzzle, it is now, in the UK at least, a pleasure to judge. And in terms of temperament, the kennel has brought in a regulation almost 15 years ago that if any dog bit within a dog show, the dog would be banned permanently from showing, and all its progeny banned permanently too. The effect was immediate, and the incidence of dogs biting people or other dogs at a show is now almost unknown. Pedigree Dogs Exposed has forced the hand of the Kennel Club, and I know the chairman and others, including Kennel Club staff, are actually pleased to be given this lever to force through further improvements, and they will do so and are doing so. But it must be made clear that the proportion of dogs affected in these ways is relatively small. The vast majority of pedigree dogs live long, healthy lives, and in fact there is no statistical difference in the lifespan of pedigree dogs and mongrels. If you go to any veterinary surgery, the number of pedigree dogs and mongrels you will see are equally balanced at about 50-50, exactly the same as the proportions as in the dog population as a whole. Go to a dog show, see for yourself.